afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest Host in Ireland webinar, Digital Infrastructure, Where Are the Opportunities in 2024? Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. The format for today's webinar will be initial chat with our panelists, followed by a question and answer session. However, you don't have to wait for the question and answer session. If you have questions, you can input them at any time during the webinar using the question and answer button that's there at the bottom of your screen. If you are joining us today on LinkedIn Live, Steve is standing by there to take note of any questions you may have. You can input them there via comments, and he will take them and pop them into the room here for our panelists. For those of you who are no stranger to Host in Ireland webinars, you'll know we tend to get quite a lot of questions. So we will try to get through as many as we possibly can on today's webinar. However, as we do expect a lot, we suggest you read through the questions already posted and simply upvote or upweight any of the questions that are similar to yours that are already posted. So without further ado, I will hand over to our moderator for today's webinar, Joyce Wadey.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanya. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to offer my own welcome to our Host in Ireland webinar, Digital Infrastructure, Where Are the Opportunities in 2024? As Tanya mentioned, my name is Joyce Wadey. I am the Head of Communications for Host in Ireland, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. As we get started, I wanted to make sure that I had the chance to mention that 2024 is a very special year for Host in Ireland. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and with it, we're also celebrating the community, the connection, the collaboration within the digital infrastructure ecosystem that we've built here in Ireland. We've really seen our success, we've really seen our motto of success through collaboration and action. And we know that what we have brought together is something very special for both ourselves and our partners. This same spirit is reflected in our newest ecosystem report, which is Irish Digital Infrastructure Collaborating for Success. That also launches today. And by registering for today's webinar, you are able to get early access to the report. And the team throughout the webinar will go ahead and be dropping links in to the chat so that you can click on and go ahead and download a copy. As we've done for the last few years, our ecosystem report takes a look at the insatiable appetite that digital infrastructure that has catapulted Ireland into the global spotlight. The success of Irish companies is one of the great under-amplified success stories from Ireland over the past 15 years. And for more than 60 years, Ireland has seen its economy grow and evolve from an agricultural-based economy to one that's built on the ambitious, brave, and creative ingenuity of foreign direct investment and ICT. And throughout this rich history, what's emerged is a digital infrastructure ecosystem that's given Irish companies the opportunity to showcase their expertise and capabilities on the world stage. And in many ways, we're at a moment in time where we're seeing the consequences of this success, is one way to phrase it. There's some uncertainty right now being brought about by the pending CRU decision as to whether or not Ireland is closed for business for new data center power connections. And we're really beginning to see some real world consequences of that. Where Ireland was once at the top of the list for ICT investment in Europe, in the last 3 months alone, many of the US companies that have called Ireland home in the EU have announced tens of billions of dollars in investment elsewhere in Europe. And while this certainly has potential to impact Ireland's economy, it doesn't necessarily have an impact on the digital infrastructure ecosystem. And why is that? Well, pretty much because Irish companies are intimately involved in these projects all around Europe and around the world. They're leveraging their experience in designing, building, supplying, and operating digital infrastructure to meet the rising demand for data center services worldwide. So as we're going to talk about today with our panelists, there's a whole new set of opportunities that are becoming available to Irish companies. Of the 58 partners that have joined Host in Ireland this year, some didn't even exist as recently as 3 years ago. And these new faces are, they're bringing a new set of skills, creativity, and ingenuity to the market. They're utilizing AI to innovate a new generation of products and services. And they're also creating jobs that would maybe not have existed a few years ago. And what this all really points to is it shows that there's a sign of maturity both within the industry as a whole and within the confidence in Irish companies. One of the other things we're going to talk about today is that there's a refresh cycle that's about to take place over the next few years in Ireland. It's a standard refresh cycle is about 5 to 7 years long. And in many ways, it's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you're finished, you need to get started again. And so what we're going to see with that refresh cycle is we'll see the effect that it has on data center design, jobs, technologies, and new ways of thinking. Far from being mere routine updates, these refresh cycles signify an opportunity for innovation and collaboration. Companies are exploring new technologies and embracing retrofitting techniques to enhance the efficiency and sustainability of digital infrastructure products. So with that background, let me take a moment and introduce our guests who will be joining me today and our discussion about the evolving Irish digital infrastructure landscape and the opportunities that are ahead in 2024. First up, we have Maurice Martel. Maurice is an independent industry advisor to Host in Ireland, and he has also had the honor of being one of the original 5 members of Host in Ireland 10 years ago. Maurice is going to share his thoughts about how far we've come in this last decade, and he's also going to help us get a better understanding of some of the challenges the industry is facing today. Next, we have Anthony McDermott, who is the director of Mitchell McDermott. Anthony offers a unique perspective today as he's seen his company grow as the Irish digital infrastructure ecosystem has grown as well. And we're going to get his insights on where he sees the opportunities really kind of coming about in 2024. And finally, we have Dame Dawn Childs. Dawn is CEO of Pure Data Centers, and she's going to talk with us about what we need to do as a collective to help address the challenges that we face as an industry moving forward. So let's go ahead and begin. Maurice, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. As I mentioned, you're one of the 5 original members of Host in Ireland. You've seen the industry and you've seen our initiative grow, you've seen the industry grow. So, kind of what are your thoughts on what's changed the most in the last 10 years, and how do you see that kind of playing out and impacting where we are today?
Thanks, George, for that. Well, so 10 years ago, the principle behind Host in Ireland was to pull together the collaboration within the industry to try and promote Ireland as a destination for hosting digital infrastructure. I think we all individually were doing our bit to try and attract investment into Ireland. And it was quite difficult doing it on your own. Even with the help of the IDA, it was good to be able to come together. And bear in mind, back then there was only 5 companies, and they were all in direct competition with each other. So it was a leap of faith for each of those organizations to come together and collectively agree a kind of I think it was the 5 Ps we went to market with them: pedigree, power, pipes, and we effectively brought together, I suppose, a unified message, and that we brought over to the US, and we promoted it internally. And I mean, I certainly didn't think that we'd still be here after 10 years, to be honest with you. I had worked at the previous group under the IBEC banner, which was representing the same cohort, more or less. And we found it very hard to put together a mandate for the industry and what to stand for and what we're really trying to achieve. Whereas under the Host in Ireland banner, that was very clear what it was we're looking to try and get out of it. But since then, I mean, it has grown enormously, and a massive ecosystem has developed on the back of that initial grouping that started. So now you've got this huge supply chain into the industry that's now forming part of the wider community. I think that's where there's been a huge opportunity. It was great, from a networking point of view, to give a lot of these companies access to the data center operators, and in turn that opened up sort of wider opportunities into probably the hyperscale market that existed and started to grow in Ireland on the back of those cloud services becoming such a huge part of the infrastructure of digital infrastructure. So as a history, I mean, I think it's achieved a huge amount. There's probably a lot more to achieve. I do think we have significant challenges at the moment, particularly in the Irish market. And we're going to have to navigate our way around those for the next couple of years to try and ensure that we've a roadmap for future growth and development.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, I'd like if you could take a couple minutes to maybe just kind of talk about, what's happening right now with the CRU for folks that may not be fully aware of, the challenges that are going on right now. What are some of the things that you think are important for our audience to know?
Yeah, so I mean, everyone on the call is probably aware that it's been a challenge around getting access to the grid and energy contracts for new data center developments. A couple of years ago, the CRU brought out a recommendation on the back of concerns around security of supply for energy in the Greater Dublin area around pockets of constrained areas that new developments have been earmarked for. So effectively, that brought in what we all sort of call now kind of a moratorium. There was no new connections allowed onto the grid effectively from that date, even though the recommendation was allowing people to get access to on-site power generation, with the view to, and the only way to do that was through gas. But in the intervening 24 months, what has happened is we see this massive inertia within the whole system of planning, applications, access to grid, access to gas, environment EPA licenses for on-site power generation. So effectively, the process has ground down to a halt, which is massive frustration for those that are sort of already in the market and for those that are trying to enter into the market, because there's uncertainty and lack of clarity around what that's going to look like in the future. The current consultation papers that are out there, I suppose the one that we're mostly concerned about is the new policy for large energy users connecting onto the grid. We've got a couple of challenges, and I see them as competing priorities. We've got a climate action or some climate action goals, and we've got ongoing digitization of our economy. We've got economic growth, and we've got a whole refresh on renewable energy onto the grid. And at the moment, a lot of those, they are competing priorities effectively, so they don't really mix. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give ourselves a transition period to work our way through what is the best way to ensure that there is still investment taking place and capacity being delivered into the market, both for the local market and also from a foreign direct investment point of view, given the history and success that the countries already had. Whilst also acknowledging the fact that there are challenges around climate action goals, there's challenges around sustainability, there's challenges around land use and biodiversity, and understanding how do data centers look at the communities in which they build their facilities. But we need to work our way through those. I mean, I think that we need to be given more time. Like the concern I have at the moment is that the CRU seems to be heading down a road that is quite climate driven, which is understandable, but without necessarily understanding the long-term economic impacts of making some rash decisions. So at the moment, we're trying very hard to try to influence that decision. So a lot of the consultation for that paper finished, by the way, on the 19th of March this week. So all the responses are in. I reckon we're probably going to have an 8 to 12 week period before the CRU comes out and makes any definitive decisions. And there'll be another chance for us to continue to engage with the various government instruments and departments to see if we can get ourselves to a position where there's a clarity around the future.
Sure, that makes sense. So, I mean, having said all that, what are some of the things that you think are the opportunities, or what are you kind of maybe more optimistic about, knowing that there's a lot of challenges, that we're sitting at a moment in time that there's a lot of things coming together that are presenting some obstacles for the industry?
Okay, well, I mean that's going to be okay. So there's already double the capacity that's already connected onto the grid. I think there's about 1.4 or 1.2 gigawatts of capacity. There's the same again that's still got to be delivered, that's already contracted onto the grid. And so that's 4 or 5 years of activity there before we even start. So that's I think that's what gives a little bit of a comfort factor for a lot of the supply chain, in my view, and all that stuff still has to be done. Obviously, with the rest of the cohort of members that are in host in Ireland, you know, a lot of them have already internationalized their businesses, so they look at the growth areas around Europe and see where a lot of the newer developments are taking place over in the Mediterranean and maybe Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and obviously the other you know, large flat areas are still developing. So there's huge opportunity, there's huge opportunity in AI and machine learning still, and massive capacity being built out across North America on the back of that growth expectation. So, and that'll only take time before that starts to emerge into EMEA. So I mean, there's no shortage of growth opportunities. I think there's no shortage of growth in data that's going to continue. I think digital infrastructure is going to drive that. And as I said earlier on, I'm hoping that we can just get it right in Ireland, that we can navigate our way through some of those current challenges that we have to ensure that we, having built up this sort of incredible digital hub and ecosystem over the last 25 years, you know, it's one of the most advanced in Europe, and a great destination for companies to come and host digital assets and digital infrastructure. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one of the things that we've talked about on past webinars is, you know, the fact that, you know, every data center project you go on across Europe and really around the world, you see Irish teams that are there being brought in specifically for their expertise and everything. So, I mean, we've done a tremendous job within the country, and there's challenges in country, but externally and export wise, you know, we've built an incredible team of people who and companies who can go do this, you know, work else anywhere else around the world as well too. So it's you know, it's definitely a new opportunity. You know, it's a good balance between the two, I guess, maybe at this point in time.
sure, and I'd say I don't think you can go on to any project outside of Ireland, and probably some of that's including into the US that doesn't have a large cohort of Irish accents or companies delivering, because the expertise that's been built up here locally is significant over the last 20 years, and that's easily exportable.
For sure. Actually, and that's also a really good transition into introducing Anthony again. You know, your company is one of those that has, you know, when Host in Ireland first started, you guys were a young company with maybe 20-ish employees or so. Yeah. You guys have grown as the, you know, as the initiative has grown, but also as the digital infrastructure ecosystem has grown as well too. So, you know, from your perspective, I mean, where are, you know, tell me a little bit more about that journey for you guys, and kind of, you know, where it's taken you, and what do you see kind of looking forward as well?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Our birthday was yesterday, so we were 9 yesterday, so we're into our 10th.
There we go.
Or similar ages.
Very close, yeah.
Yeah, very close. Yeah, from our end, look, we're quantity surveyors and project managers, consultants. We work across all the sectors, but we focused in on the data center sector about 10 years ago. And we grew considerably with it in Ireland, both in quantity surveying and project management. But more recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, we see that, like a lot of the designers, consultants, contractors, as Morris has said, like there's a huge tight relationships with data center clients in Ireland, and these data center clients then are developing projects across Europe and beyond, and they're taking the contractors, clients, or the subcontractors and designers with them on these projects across Europe. And the same has happened for us in the last 3 or 4 years, be it in Scandinavia, across Europe, and even as far as Asia. So it's a fantastic news story for Ireland in terms of exporting that expertise and that intelligence, and it's fantastic. And thankfully, we're on the same wave as our colleagues, designers and contractors and subcontractors. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, we've talked about in the past, you know, like it's almost a type of intellectual property in a way of the Irish system, you know, is that there's that depth of relationship, the expertise that's been built, you know, the willingness to then take those trusted partners and take them into other markets, continue to build these data center projects. I mean, it's something that I think is unique And it's also something that is very, like you mentioned, very exportable.
Oh, very exportable. And I even think like one of the positives that came out of the whole COVID piece was, working online, on Zoom, on Teams, all the rest of it. And it's just proven that designers, consultants, contractors can do an awful lot of the work from Ireland across Europe. Obviously, you need boots on the ground across Europe with contractors and subcontractors, but a lot of the design work and the consultancy work can be done from Ireland. So, and again, that all ties into data and into data centers and the whole circle again. And yeah, it's working really well.
So, as an Irish company in the industry, I mean, what are the biggest opportunities that you see for the market in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I suppose, not to repeat what Maurice has said, but I suppose the most obvious one is obviously there's a power issue in Ireland. We've got 1,500 megawatts live at the moment. There's nearly the same again to be delivered. It'll be a struggle to get that delivered in terms of power. But as I said in the earlier piece, there's still this huge growth across Europe and beyond. So I suppose from our perspective and a lot of our colleagues and companies' perspective, it's the huge growth across Europe and even in the UK. Like if we look even since the start of the year, there's nearly $12 billion of announcements of projects from Oracle, Microsoft, and Google. And again, as Maurice said, you've got your Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris. You have those clusters, but now you've got other countries like Spain, across Scandinavia, and other parts of the countries in Germany and places like that. So there's a huge opportunity there. And again, there's clients that are based in Ireland that are spreading across, so those relationships are just continuing on. So I suppose that's the first huge opportunity we see. And I suppose from our end, we're pushing it because we see it as a huge growth factor for us. And then the second, maybe not so much obvious opportunity is back to Ireland again. So you have a lot of these clients that are sitting in data centers in Ireland. And as I said, we've got about 1,500 megawatts. And some of these, when they get to 8-10 years, come to the end of their life cycle in terms of efficiency. So there's a big refurb coming as well. And myself and David in BitPower, we're doing an exercise at the moment to see, what's going to start coming online for refurnishing on a year-on-year basis. So I suppose if you look at there's 1,500 megawatts here at the moment, there'll be a big chunk of that coming online for refurbishment going forward. And I suppose the other piece in Ireland as well is I think they're known as some of them are known as circular hubs, where you have a lot of the hyperscales when they're refreshing their data centers, they're getting the large equipment, bringing it into building new manufacturing type buildings and refurnishing, be it servers, be it AC units, switchgear. So again, there's an opportunity there as well in terms of new build and new manufacturing for these refreshes and recycling.
So I think one of the things that was interesting as we were kind of having our pre-webinar chat, is this concept that the refresh cycle isn't just replacing older equipment with newer equipment. It's really a chance in many ways to innovate and to kind of maybe think about doing something differently and approaching the market, approaching how they build out their data center differently, because there aren't necessarily the same constraints. It's not the same new build regulations that are in place. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I suppose, and again, it's funny how it all ties in again, because with the growth in AI, then a lot of the operators are going to apply AI to use the new equipment that they have more efficiently and cut down on energy and cut down on water. And even we've seen, you can see the new innovation coming in terms of coolant in racks themselves. So you need less water in terms of your IEC units and air conditioning. So there's an awful lot of innovation coming that way. But the recycling piece of the existing equipment and making it more efficient as well, that's a great news story as well for data centers in terms of environmental and reuse of existing equipment.
Yeah, because I mean the efficiency part of it is a huge driver across the board. And I mean, one of the things that Gary Connolly always talks about is how digitalization and decarbonization have to go hand in hand with each other.
They have to, yeah, absolutely. And like I suppose some of the older data centers would have a PUE or an efficiency of maybe the 2s, and then when the operators come back in and refurnish them, they can get that down to 1.6s and 1.4. So you're getting a lot more efficiency out of your power that's coming into the data center. So again, it's definitely something that owners and operators are looking at in a big way.
Yeah, for sure. So So Dawn, let's bring you into the chat now. So last week when we were chatting, you had a really interesting phrase that you used. You talked about a wicked problem, and can you talk about like what that is and what you mean by that, and how does that apply to the data center industry, both here in Ireland and abroad?
Certainly, and so a wicked problem is a term that was used back in the 1970s in the UK when it was looking at social planning issues and social policy and trying to resolve the challenges there. And effectively, a wicked problem has got a few sort of complexities to it. So it's so complicated that you can't see necessarily a single solution pathway to it. Once you've started on your solution pathway, you can't stop it. So you can't like stop and start again. Once you've set yourself a path you're going down, it's really difficult to reverse out of that. And the problem is so complex that you don't really understand the problem until you've started going down your solution pathway. So you end up in a little bit of a weird situation where until you start solving the problem, you don't really understand the full problem. And I think it's a real parallel to the data center challenge that we have currently, because if we go sort of not just from an Ireland perspective, but if we go up to the macro scale, currently data centers are using around 2% of global power, and in Dublin it's nearly a third. So what you're seeing is the whole community and governments going, oh my goodness, power hungry data centers, what are we going to do? But at the same time, the demand for data centers is growing exponentially with the use of AI, machine learning, continuation of expansion of the cloud, and there are more and more people needing to get online. So everyone's using their phones all the time. So the problem is growing, and we're not getting on a solution pathway to fixing the problem. So if we add on to that, the power and the community and the people challenge, we've also got the sustainability challenge, where we're all needing to move towards net zero. There's not only the power grid net zero piece, but actually decarbonising data centres in their entirety. That's a problem. That's increasing cost, which then creates another supply chain problem. We've still got the impacts of the COVID challenges with supply chain, and of course the Suez issues and the sort of global conflict issues that we've currently got as well. Mix into that then the talent trouble, because we don't have enough talent for even the amount of work that we need to deliver at the moment, let alone this future demand. And you're starting to see that there's this real wicked problem that's getting together. Now, I guess the good news is that when the wicked problem term was coined in the 1970s, they also agreed on 3 solutions that there are to a wicked problem, or 3 solution pathways. The first one is authoritative, which would be your regulatory. So that's kind of what you've done in Ireland, where the regulator's gone, nope, that's it. Nobody else is connecting into the power grid. If you've got a data center, sorry, it's not happening. What we've seen, not only with the challenge you have for the CIU here, but also more globally, a regulatory solution very rarely provides the right answer. If I give a sort of a similar challenge that I've seen with regulation, when I was at National Grid in the UK, the way that the queuing system for generation to go onto the National Grid works was in the regulation first come first serve, and so you had to be in the queue to get to get connected, and this is for things like wind, solar, etc. coming online, and this regulation created a problem where you had 10 times the amount of power waiting to get online as the peak demand on a daily basis in the UK, and you had all of these zombie projects where you didn't have the land, you didn't have the investor or anything. They just put themselves in the queue because they knew that to get to the top of the queue they had to be in the queue. So you ended up with this massive challenge where the electricity system operator couldn't actually connect all of the great things they wanted to into the grid to decarbonize the grid, because they had to work their way through all of these zombie projects that were in the queue. So regulation really won't provide the answer. The second solution pathway is competitive. So getting all of the companies that are trying to build data centers to compete to be able to get the last bit of power, perhaps in Dublin to connect into, or to convert gas into power, and to really compete, and the price will go up, and I think collectively will fail. The final solution pathway is collaboration, and of course Hosting Ireland is a great example of that. And right. I think the only way that we are ever going to meet the demand of data centers that is coming online, and and it's significant at the moment. In 2022, the energy survey that was done showed that there were 460 terawatt hours of electricity worldwide used for data centers. The forecast is that that will go by 2026 up to 1,000 terawatt hours. So that's the equivalent of adding all of Germany's power consumption on again just to furnish data centers. So this is a huge problem, and I think my point is that the pie is so big, there's enough pie for everybody. So competing isn't going to help us to solve this problem. Regulation absolutely will fail. The only solution pathway I think we can work on is to collectively collaborate and try and figure a way through this and work with regulators, work with governments, work with local communities, really better describe the data center industry for people so they can understand that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. We're like, the fourth utility. Everybody needs us. So just going no isn't the answer.
Yeah. And I think, you raised this point, but it is a global issue. I mean, last week, the New York Times, the Washington Post had the same headlines about data centers are consuming too much power and the power grid can't handle it. And that's, like, it's always amazes me that Ireland seems to be the canary in the coal mine in some ways of, issues that we're facing, and tend to, show up in other places too. So this is very much a global issue that everyone's facing, and that really does require collaboration at that kind of scale.
It does, but the good news is, of course, that there are new markets where sort of all of the experiences that you've had in Ireland and we've experienced in other European countries and in the US can be used to improve the way that data center infrastructure is put in new geographies. So we can do that, and AI and machine learning can happen anywhere. It doesn't need to be connected into the availability zones that the hyperscalers currently have. It can be remote. So there is an opportunity to recast this and do it better elsewhere from the learnings that we have.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that kind of is what happened in Africa too, when the mobile networks came about. In the Western countries, we kind of had the stair step of the way that the communications networks were built, but in Africa, they could just kind of leap to the latest technology, and that seems to sound like that's what you're talking about in this situation as well. In some markets, they can take the best practices and be able to, take the expertise of the Irish teams and put them into practice straight away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got a bunch of questions coming in. So why don't I go ahead and start to see if we can answer a few of those. The first one that we have is from Michael Lantry, and his question is, what trends have the panelists seen with data center talent in Ireland over the last couple of years, and what do they predict will happen in the future? So I don't know, Anthony, do you want to maybe take that one first to kind of talk a little bit more on the talent side and kind of what you've seen from your perspective and through Mr. McDermott?
Yeah, I think as Dawn said, and Morris, it's a sector that's, and I've seen this from when we started 10 years ago. It's a sector that's growing in a vertical fashion. So naturally enough, then the demand for talent is huge. So I suppose from our end, on the quantity surveying project management piece, it's a constant training piece internally, getting the guys on site and girls on site and training them up. But I suppose on a global picture, as Dawn said, talent is an issue because it's a sector that's growing so quickly. It's a constant training piece internally to be able to get these people with experience. There's a shortage talent-wise, I would say, and there will be.
Yeah. I mean, it's been pretty well publicized. I think it's Uptime Institute had there's a potential shortage of 300,000 positions in the next couple of years with people retiring and growth in the industry and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Morris, I know you're more recently an independent industry analyst. You've been very deep in the heart of things in the data center industry in Ireland. What have you, in your previous role, what were some of the challenges that you saw in that regard from a talent perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we struggled all the time to try and have 100% recruit. We're recruiting regularly into the operations teams and the shift teams 24/7. We always found it difficult to hang on to people after maybe 3 or 4 years. So employee retention was a huge task for us. Getting in qualified people, electricians, mechanical, electrical engineers, to work on the bigger systems was a challenge. So that was again a continuous sort of cycle of recruiting, both from the organization itself and using external resources. We did a lot of work with the universities on internships. So we did a lot of work with Tala and TUD to where the sites were located and around that part of Dublin. And we brought in interns in first and second year, and then tried over time to get them to take full-time roles when they qualified. We did some work on trying to change some of the syllabuses in some of the universities to try and be more adaptive to the data center environment. A lot of the time, we probably spent a lot of time training the people ourselves internally over an 18-month, 2-year period. And that's only on that discipline. I mean, if you go into the design and construction, which has been a huge growth area employment-wise from an Irish perspective, so my previous role in Equinix, most of the design and construction team that runs EMEA are from Ireland, because of the skill set that was built up over here over the last 20 years. And they're constantly trying to recruit into that team because of the growth in xScale and the growth in the organic sort of co-location market that sort of runs the traditional business. So it's a massive challenge, and the great opportunities there, and there's loads of movement within the industry because it's a very promiscuous, if that's the right word. People move around a lot.
I think that there's we have to be more inclusive and increase diversity, because when I've only been in the industry a couple of years, right? And it was really clear to me that as we were trying to hire global teams, and clearly we've got a live data center over in Dublin there, so including a team in Ireland, there was a bit of a fixed mindset of, we have to get suitably experienced people, so they need to come from within the industry. That won't work. We have to open our doors. We have to bring talent in from other industries, but either with transferable skills or, like Maurice was just saying, training people, so working with universities, working with further education colleges, working with schools, getting young talent in early and bringing them into the industry. So I think we need to sort of step outside of that fixed mindset of you have to have been in the industry to be in the industry, because that just won't work. I also think that in Ireland, you need to just be careful that there's not the brain drain to sort of moving outside. If you end up with this continued moratorium, that there is a risk, despite all of the fabulous facilities of being able to do things over Teams and Zoom and remote working, there is boots on the ground requirements. The burgeoning scale of data center delivery needed means that the GCC will be going, hey, come over here, work in this tax-free environment. It's going to be fantastic. And so you might see some movement of the very people that you're wanting to keep as onshore talent moving offshore. So I do think there's quite a sensitive inflection point here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like an inflection point is a good phrase for it. So, so our next question is from Gary Dillon, and it says, would a change in minister at government level make a difference to improving clarity to the sector and lead to an increase in investment? What are your thoughts that Ireland has a green focused minister responsible for energy? I don't know, Maurice, do you want to?
I'm glad you got that one, Maurice.
Okay, so that department is challenged, I think, because of what it has to cover off. And you've got environment, energy, communications, and it's even within that, there's competing priorities. And so I suppose my view is that a change make a change. I mean, that we have an issue, and we understand that. I think, like, to Dawn's point, closer collaboration with the industry, proper engagement, at the right time to give the industry the opportunity to really present the solutions that they are talking about to assist Ireland get to where it needs to get to, and they are significant. And most of the cohort of that operator industry have deep pockets, and they're prepared to invest if there's going to be a sign that they're allowed to continue to grow, and that'll help us get to where we need to get to. I did like I saw in Amsterdam they have a new ministerial position of the Netherlands where they've got a person who's got climate action and economic growth policies straddled under the same banner. Now, that can be complicated, I'm quite sure, but I don't think you can do one without the other, and I think you need to understand the implications of doing one without the other, and you can't decide just to go down one road and then let the other fall by the wayside. There is a way of working in tandem with it, and maybe with the general election coming up, there'll be a change anyway, and we'll be working with some other people. But for now, we are where we are, and I just think we need to try and get all the heads together to understand that any definitive decisions at this present moment in time, could stop investment in the short term, which we don't want to do. And I think that's really where we want to try and get to if we can.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Our next question here is from Peter Haas. It says, as we see AI apps expand and continued growth of cloud resources, do any of the panelists see issues or problems with cloud service provider access? Anyone who would want to take a stab at that one?
I didn't get the end of it.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, and if I'm not, then please, Peter, re-ask it in a different way, so I answer a different question. But effectively, I think there is a challenge where you will see, at the moment there's this AI race going on, and not everybody will win the race, right? There'll be some of the hyperscalers that come out on top and some that don't, and depending on the data sets that those AI apps have access to, you might end up with stranded data sets or some AI machine learning that doesn't have as rich enough data source. And I think there's a regulatory challenge with that, as well as the sort of the infrastructure challenge that might be linked in with it. So I do think there are some challenges in the data space. I think that there will be real issues for governments setting policy and laws around the use of data, and not just sort of data sovereignty, i.e. data sets that stay in particular countries, like GDPR drives you for personal data, but also companies that have their own data sets. So you might sort of think that if you've got a significantly old company that has really rich data going back for decades, that they might have some great apps that they could use using their data source, which if they get IP over would make that really helpful. And if that then linked in with one of the hyperscalers, then you really are cooking on gas with your AI app and your AI tool. However, there isn't really yet that I've seen a solution, a legal solution that's been given to the data ownership, the IP piece on the data sets. And the data that's already out there in open source is already open source. So quite how they solve for that, I'm not sure. But you could end up with stranded data assets and AI apps that end up as not very helpful, because garbage in, garbage out. If that was the answer to the question.
I think that's you're right. It was a little general, but I think that was a good answer in tying the two issues and stuff together. So, so the next question we have is from Kevin Fortune. This one says, is there potential to adjust the function of energy storage systems, which are required by data centers for short-term backup, in a way that would assist the penetration of renewable generators such as wind and solar?
Happy to go again, but I don't want to if Anthony or Maurice want to. But so yes, Bart. So I think there's a challenge with any renewable energy in terms of it giving you that steady base load. That said, there are numerous examples where hyperscalers are particularly putting AI data centers next to co-located with their own solar farm, wind farm, or whatever, because AI doesn't need to have that steady state base load and endurance that you might need or that you do need in a cloud data center. So absolutely, there is the opportunity to do that. If you're connected into the grid, though, the electricity system operator will do that smoothing for you, so it almost doesn't matter. But we already have examples where hyperscalers are co-locating such renewable generators next to their data centers. There is, of course, the potential for nuclear to be a great form of renewable or definitely far greener energy, and small modular reactors are really being looked at. I think the challenge with that, though, would be in the regulatory space, because at the moment, to get any form of consenting for nuclear is way beyond the purview that the hyperscalers have for putting their data centers in. So yeah, there'd need to be quite a bit of collaboration and working together to come up with a solution for that.
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting as well, Joyce, that in Ireland, the data center sector is one of the biggest investors in green energy and in wind energy in Ireland. It's worth noting that.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much potential too, with just the fact that, as an island, there's a lot of coastline, there's a lot of wind generation possibilities coming down the line and stuff in the future too. So absolutely. So there's another question here that is, John, I'm going to take this back to you because it's kind of playing off of your talk about collaboration. But it's also kind of talking about the power suppliers and generators and their role in that collaboration as well. The question is, what opportunities are there for collaboration between large energy users and power generators, both thermal and renewable, and bringing the conversation to a broader pool just beyond energy users and regulators?
And so it really depends on the setup through the CRU. I can talk very clearly about the way the national grid setup is in the UK, and I think CRU is pretty similar, right? So at the moment, unless you're going to go for a direct microgrid, so what I just described, having a solar farm next to your data center, and you are, effectively you've got a private wire and you're the only user of that energy, it's very difficult to do that. So yes, we can talk to matching the power generators to the power demands in terms of maybe through investments and trying to connect the projects in so that you get power in, power out. But unless it's directly connected to your data center, it would have to be done through PPAs and through, because the ESO is the one that actually balances the grid. You can't, other than through a PPA go, or power purchase agreement go, I'm using that green power. So it's all done through sign-offs and credits. So unless you create your own microgrid, it's done through pieces of paper rather than direct connections.
Right. Morris, is there anything from your perspective on that, as all these conversations have been going around about what the CRU is trying to do and looking for, and what the concerns are of the data center providers in Ireland?
I mean, can you hear me? Yeah, one of the concerns is around security of supply, and I think that's been raised from 2 years ago. We've been at pains to point out the capability of the sites to not only take flex demand, which a lot of the new connection agreements that were signed up to agree to, but also export capacity, go on to standby generation when there's in peak periods. So there's lots of solutions, on-site energy storage, battery storage, that can be used to facilitate ongoing development while it's not impacting the grid. To Dawn's point, the private wire would have to be obviously regulated here in the sense that it's not allowed at the moment. But that's another way around being able to get yourself up and running. Nuclear doesn't form part of our discussion at all, bizarrely, because we don't take it into part of the equation. So there's and as regards to the PPAs and renewables, we have been chronically slow in bringing a lot of these projects to fruition. We're way off where we should be on our renewable energy capabilities, given the resources that the country potentially has, both offshore and onshore. And that's slowing up that transition from fossil fuels onto renewables, which is complicating the wider discussion the CRU is having around how do you get to 80-20 by 2030, when we're still sort of flipped almost the other way around fossil fuel, even though a lot of renewable energy gets used on the grid at certain times, and the quantity that's needed for that transition and also for standard sort of economic growth is very, very slow. And it's even difficult for the industry to invest in PPAs locally if you're looking to try and invest in the country that you're doing your business, because they're taking so long for them to get through the system to sort of be able to bring capacity onto the grid. So that is complicating the discussion. And maybe just on a wider point around Europe, I spent some time my last year in Equinix. I was running their sustainability program in EMEA, and we spent a lot of time with the European Commission around what their view was around digital infrastructure and its deployment across Europe. And the reality is, just from a growth perspective on the opportunity, like they're nowhere near where they want to be to have Europe fit for the digital age around the amount of infrastructure it needs to have. And that's hyperscale, it's co-location, it's digital edge, it's everywhere. And the biggest concern was how do you try and do this in such a way that not one or two large providers come in and sort of take over the whole market and deliver it out there, and then they've lost, the run of it. So I do think there's got to be some regulation around that. That's my expectation from talking to them. They are working with industry. They're working with the European Data Center Association and the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact people around, efficiencies and monitoring sustainability and data centers of the future and how they should be built and how do you get to a net zero and all that sort of stuff. But I do feel, whether it's right or wrong, I do feel there's going to be some regulation around the edges of it, because I think that they're just really concerned if you let it off to run itself, it'll just it'll go off in a direction that they feel they might lose control over.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the EU is one of the. Oh, sorry, Anthony. I was just going to say, I think the EU is one of the geographies around the world that is much more likely to use regulation as a tool, as part of the arsenal in addressing this, at least up front. I think we'll see it kind of balance out around the world, but initially the EU seems to be much more willing to use that carrot and stick in the process and stuff as well.
Yeah, there's regulation coming into parts of Europe already in terms of the efficiency that data centers have to meet. And that will start coming into Ireland, I'd imagine, as well, which will then tie into this refurb piece that we talked about earlier. So you'll see a lot of that would apply to Ireland, and you'll see it rolling out across Europe as well in terms of the refresh piece as well from an efficiency perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. Taking the conversation a slightly different direction, we'll probably just have time for this one last question. There was also a question was asked about, we've been talking about exporting, and we've been talking about, what's happening in the broader world. Bringing it back into Ireland, is there an opportunity to look at other areas within the Irish market, like, say Cork, or is there, some sort of accelerated expansion that might take place within Ireland itself outside of Dublin?
Yeah, yes is the answer. The challenge has always been, given the cluster that was in Dublin, to try and replicate that from a connectivity point of view was going to be really, really challenging. Even if you look at cable landing stations across the south coast and the west coast, to try and connect those into parts of the Dublin ecosystem, and then be able to replicate that from an interconnection delivery point of view was challenging because of the distances between the city and between the cities, I should say. And it's always been a challenge then economically. If you do that, then if you're building a colo site down in one of those locations, can you be guaranteed to get the business in? That it could take you 5-10 years to try and get that site up to in any way cash flow positive. So that was always a challenge. But given where we are at the moment, I certainly feel that there's a discussion at least to be had around, another location somewhere in the country where you can look at building out large scale infrastructure that's got connectivity built in around it, and that's some kind of a digital park that's got energy capabilities close by that we can connect in. And maybe that goes back to the private wire discussion to understand, how do we do that rather than try to wait for the grid to get itself in order. And then have the ability to grow certain parts of the cohort in areas like that. And the challenge we have with the cities is that they are completely reliant on that dense network connectivity piece and all the on ramps and off ramps to the cloud service providers, and that's been built up over 20 years, and hence that's how Flap built up their ecosystems, and the same way Dublin did. So there's a need to have ability to grow that sort of infrastructure immediately, because I don't think there's any capacity out there at the moment in the market for the standard colo company that's looking to sort of look at using data center services and digitization for their businesses, because they're all constrained at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think one thing I'd like to do is just kind of, as we wrap this up, ask each of our panelists, if there's one thought that you could leave our audience with, what would that be? What would you like our audience to take away from today's discussion?
I'll jump in first. I think my piece would be that, you know, there's a lot of negativity out there in terms of the moratorium and power in Ireland, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity there as well in terms, as we said, the refresh, the refurb, exporting the skills that we have here in Ireland. I do think government are beginning to actually see the importance of data centres. And as Dawn said earlier, that data is actually like a utility now. It's like water, it's like power. It's that important to how the whole country works. So I think the government is finally beginning to see that. So hopefully they might act on it. Close on
it. For me, it's about working together with a collective voice, because the digital infrastructure is required. You don't want to lose your pace in Ireland, because you've got this great history, and so such a good infrastructure already. We need to continue to capitalize on that. And so by working together and having that singular voice and helping the regulators, CRU, etc., to see a pathway through this with us, I think is the only way to win.
Right.
And for me, maybe just given the work I'm doing at the moment around that piece with the various agencies and departments, I think there was a bit of a disconnect between enterprise and the Department of the Taoiseach and Department of Communications around what they're trying to do and to remain competitive and to reach climate goals, and they're driving their decisions based on what they're trying to do within their department. I do think maybe a digital leader within one of the departments, or that role that is, straddles climate action and economic growth, because it is a complex area. It's not easy to navigate your way through it. And you do need to engage with all industry stakeholders to try and understand how to get to where you need to get to. If we could get that, given the chance that maybe now with possibly an election looming this year to sort of get that unraveled, because where it currently is, it's a bit of a logjam for us. That'd be on my wish list.
Great. Yeah. No, and you're right. It is really complex. It's not a simple problem. There's not simple answers. There's a lot of different areas that it has to cover. So I think that could be a very useful addition to the government for sure. So, and I see Gary has popped in and is joining us to say hello right here at the end for everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What a great show. Thank you so much, Joyce. It's been like a celebration, and today is a celebration for Host in Ireland, as we are in our 10th year. But even listening to Maurice and Dawn, and also to Anthony, when we started Host in Ireland 10 years ago, the good news is the only thing that's stayed the same is my hairstyle. We've changed it so much. And interestingly enough, 10 years, maybe before its time, and we've still got it, success through collaboration is our tagline. It's become very popular. Dawn, you might have said it 10 times. Collaboration, collaboration. It's not a new thing. It's now actually that we need to spread it across. Don't be so deep and narrow in our own little sector, because the sector has two other groups that need to be very much part of the discussion: regulatory and electron generation. So now we can actually expand that out, and that's came across really strong. The word paradox is one that actually I was thinking of. How can an industry in Ireland, which is really the exemplar for showing the challenges of success, and that is what data is to Ireland. The reason that we have these challenges in Ireland is we're so successful in it for 50 years. The reason that we have these challenges of more data is because we were successful putting it onto CD-ROMs, floppy disks, and whatever else medium before. It's a fundamental part of our FDI story. So it's a challenge of our success and continued success to find a solution. And when Anthony was talking there about the size and scale of the refresh cycle, and you might have mentioned the Golden Gate Bridge, in the next 4 years in Ireland, it's anticipated that we'll have as much data center refresh activity, more by financial and size, than some of the emerging markets. So the opportunity for the Irish ecosystem to grow continues. And then obviously I have to go back to because we're pretty good at it at the moment, rugby. And I remember we knew Ireland was onto something when the New Zealand commentators and journalists started to use 3 words to recognize that the Irish team were now brave, creative, and relentless. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Irish companies internationally. And that's exactly what we need to see in Ireland with all of the different parts of the equation. So that's it. It's been a great show. I'd like to commend and ask those that are hiding in the background, which are the team that made all this happen, to show yourselves, because we must show you if you want to say thank you so much. Thank you to Carla. Thank you to Mira. Thank you to Tanya if you're going to show. Thank you to Stephen. And obviously, thank you, Joyce. You've been wonderful. And to our wonderful moderator, and also to our panelists, which Morris, thank you so much. Dawn, well done. And Anthony, you're always a showstopper. I'll leave it with what's absolutely fantastic. My big takeaway was this wicked problem thing, Dawn, right? You know, I also would add to that it's as if this challenge or a challenge has been presented for the very first time. It hasn't. It's just that we're now in the innovation age 4.0, 5.0. Each innovation age, from steam to electricity, has had these challenges. So that's wonderful. We're going through a new cycle. It may be accelerated. And my final request to all you engineers there is change PUE from what you know it as to please use English. It'll be the greatest thing we ever do to try and communicate with non-industry people. So with that, I think we're done. Well done, everybody, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.